Hello, good hunter. You've come to a very dangerous place. A video essay channel on YouTube. If you're brave enough to see this nightmare through, you'll be treated to an educational journey across one of the greatest games ever made, Bloodborne.
Not sure how I feel about you calling my channel a dangerous nightmare, but thanks for the intro. For our second spooky video of October, we are indeed talking about Bloodborne. And yes, I do believe it is one of the greatest games of all time. I love the entire Soulsborne catalog. It might as well be legally required to love them if you want to do critical video game essays here on YouTube. And while everything from Dark Souls to Sekiro has rich lore and terrifying bosses and maze-like world design, Bloodborne has a mechanic that truly sets it apart from the pack: insight. Let's talk about that. Bloodborne is a horrifying game. Not in the jump scare, loud noise way that other games might be horrifying, but in a literary sense. The easiest comparison to make is, of course, HP Lovecraft. His stories gave us the term Lovecraftian Horror, which is used to describe, well, the indescribable. Things like cosmic beings and deep-sea creatures that defy our measly human explanations and language. In the thesis Weird Decentering, Braden Timms describes Lovecraft's work as short stories depicting a world that is determined to undermine the ideals and arrogant assumptions of 20th century rationality, a nightmarish undoing of everything that could have been called human or humanity. I think that's a perfect description for Bloodborne too. We're not going to get super deep into Bloodborne lore on this one. I'll leave that to the expert. But if you know the basic story of the game, you know why that description fits. The people of Yharnam thought they could understand the Great Ones and the cosmic power they wield, but they obviously couldn't. Scholars went mad with knowledge, villagers turned into beasts due to blood experiments. Their arrogant assumptions were undermined, resulting in their undoing. In describing Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness, Timms recounts the undoing of a group of Antarctic explorers. The closer these men of science look, the more the taxonomy of the Elder Things seems to confer them to the non-scientific realm of monsters and mythology. We're going to do the same thing here, using the insight mechanic. Let's take a closer look at how monsters and mythology affect not just the characters of Bloodborne, but us, the players of the game too. After all, as Daniel Lidman puts it in another essay, The Language and Psychology of HP Lovecraft, the art of Lovecraft is embedded within the mentality of his characters.
I do quite enjoy HP's work. You know, minus all the racist stuff.
If I had to describe Bloodborne in a single word, I'd say forbidding. Dark Souls and its sequels seem to invite you to explore, with grand cities and majestic mountains teeming with secrets. Bloodborne has those things too, but more than any other From Software game, it adamantly does not want you to learn about them. Martyr Logarius guards the throne room of Queen Annalise at Canehurst Castle. Lady Maria fights you atop the Astral Clock Tower to stop you from reaching the fishing hamlet. You shouldn't be there. You shouldn't be seeing any of this. But when you do, you gain insight. Every encounter with a boss or mysterious force makes the number tick up. This stat represents how much you've learned during your hunt. You need this knowledge to summon other hunters to your world and to make purchases from the Bath Messengers. It's both a currency and, well, a curse. Just look at the description of Madman's knowledge, a consumable item that increases insight. It's the skull of someone driven mad by forbidden knowledge, by seeing things which should never be seen. The higher your insight gets, the more of these visions you'll witness for yourself. At a base level, you need just one to interact with the doll in the hunter's dream, to see her as a living being and not an abandoned plaything.
Hello, good hunter. I am a doll, here in this dream to look after you.
At 40 insight, you'll start seeing frightening creatures called Amidala, who would otherwise be invisible, despite the fact that they're massive multi-armed aliens that cling to the sides of buildings like kaiju. Furthermore, insight is linked to the frenzy status effect. The more you have, the faster you'll go mad with frenzy, which emanates from certain grotesque enemies like the Winter Lantern. Bloodborne forbids you from even being near these monsters by means of projectiles made of pure insanity. Conversely, the less insight you have, the less knowledge of the arcane you possess, and the less that madness will grow within you. Here's what happens when I let some celestial children attack me while at a very high level of insight. And here's what happens when I let them attack me when I have 0. Notice how much less it builds up?
I only wish they weren't so cute. Makes them so much harder to stab.
It's not just we, the players, who possess insight. Characters we meet, and those who passed on long before the events of the game, are also cursed with forbidden knowledge. The previously mentioned At the Mountains of Madness tells the story of Antarctic explorers who can't handle the discovery of monsters in the ice. And in Bloodborne, we see the cold, snowy ruins of the Vile Blood Kingdom at Canehurst, destroyed by a war over the blood experiments that doomed the people of Yharnam to their beastly forms. The Shadow over Innsmouth is set in a port town full of people who are slowly mutating into fish monsters, much like the residents of the fishing hamlet. The Dunwich Horror features a child who was conceived by a human woman and the cosmic being Yog-Sothoth. Multiple women in Bloodborne give birth to hideous half-alien creatures.
It can't be. This is a nightmare.
The events of Lovecraftian literature are clearly a strong inspiration, but so are the themes. Lovecraft concentrates upon the aftermath, as Lidman says. We witness this aftermath in Bloodborne ourselves. We see the results of madness driven by the pursuit of insight. There are multiple face-sucking monsters that will actually drain insight from within your skull because they crave it so much. The lecture hall is full of Bergenworth scholars whose research turned them into slime monsters, and others at the Bergenworth campus have turned into insectoid creatures with faces full of eyes. The Garden of Eyes, as this enemy is called, is an aggressive representation of insight gone wrong, one of many enemies that embody the concept. Even something as simple as a pig goes mad when it witnesses cosmic horror in the Nightmare of Mensis. As you ascend the castle there, you'll encounter hogs with just as many beady eyes as the Bergenworth bugs. The Old Hunters DLC represents this madness with an eye pendant, a key item which you'll insert into a skull to activate a lift. In case it wasn't already clear, these humans and animals are so full of insight and literal eyeballs inside their skulls that eyes have burst forth from their faces. Bergenworth is inextricably tied to these deformities. The description of the Great One's wisdom, another consumable item which grants insight, includes a quote from the head of the college, Master Willem. "What we need are more eyes." In a bit of a twist, Master Willem himself has no eyes to be seen when we meet him by the lake, perhaps to shield him from witnessing any more cosmic horror, thus preventing further madness. All he can do is point us toward the lake that houses Ram, the vacuous spider. As expected, our insight increases when we witness the Great One with our own eyes.
Good thing arachnophobia is rare among us hunters. I don't like clowns, though.
Like Master Willem, there are others who can't see either. The patients in the research hall have such swollen heads that they can only see the fluid inside the sac surrounding their face.
See my eyes? I'm afraid I've dropped them in a puddle.
In the thesis Fear and Madness in the Fiction of HP Lovecraft, Philip Snyder speaks about Lovecraft's own use of eyes in his works. If there is a pair of eyes expressing fear, then there is likely something within sight that is threatening. Likewise, the bright, curious eyes of the celestial children stare off at the Lumen Flower Gardens, home to Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos, who is worshipped by the Healing Church. Conversely, the sad, crying eyes of Queen Yharnam stare up toward the top of her castle. It's there you'll face Murgo's wet nurse, and as with all the other bosses in Bloodborne, simply seeing her darkly angelic, multi-limbed form causes your insight to increase. In fact, with all the exploration you do and insight you gain throughout the game, you're no better than the scholars who were driven mad by the desire for more eyes. That's the cruel truth of this game. It's full of areas you are not meant to visit, of sights you are not meant to see. And yet you do. You keep pushing forward because that's how we play video games. Snyder has this to say about Lovecraft's characters. Through the process of behavioral analysis of unconscious, instinctual self-preservation behaviors, we can make a case to support the sanity or insanity of a given character. By gauging whether or not the character displays healthy threat avoidance behaviors, we can see whether the character has a healthily functioning mind. We, the Bloodborne players, fail that test. We actively seek out threats and confront them, not just for a sense of victory in beating From Software's notoriously tough bosses, but to keep digging deeper into the rich lore of this world. We recklessly dive into a lake to fight a giant spider from space. We find severed umbilical cords and mercilessly crush them for Ka's sake. The more insight we gain, the more horrors we can witness, and the more damage we can take from frenzy-inducing monsters. In my interpretation, that's why Gehrman rises to fight us at the game's climax if we don't submit to his execution. He can see the madness growing within us, and he must stop it.
It always comes down to the hunter's helper to clean up after these sons of messes.
Hey, show some respect for Gehrman. That boomer has a scythe and he knows how to use it.
Just as the people of Yharnam witnessed the cosmos and suffered for it, anyone who plays Bloodborne will be forever burdened with the dark knowledge of the game. It's a madness clearly inspired by the works of HP Lovecraft, with his downward spirals of humanity and horrible visions seen with the eyes of his characters. Witnessing this increased the insight of Bloodborne scholars, causing them to mutate into monsters that hunters must put down. You too will gain this insight as you play the game, slowly descending into a frenzy of deep-sea threats and cosmic boss battles. But for those who crave knowledge enough to consume all that Bloodborne has to offer, there's a great reward. You can go further than any of those Bergenworth scholars ever did. Master Willem knew the umbilical cords were the key to a cosmic existence beyond Yharnam. He couldn't execute this plan, but you can. The ultimate conclusion of your journey is the transformation of your own hunter into a great one, reaching a plane that Master Willem could only dream of. Insight brings madness, but that madness can also bring ascension.
Oh, good hunter.
Hey, thank you so much for watching our second spooky video of October. If you like what Framework is doing, definitely hit that subscribe button in the middle. It would help me out an awful lot if you do. And if you want to see what we've already cooked up, you can hit that link on the far left. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.